My name is Zoey, and I live in Austin, Texas. For as long as I can remember, I've felt like an outsider in my own home. My mom passed away when I was only 12. Cancer. That word still feels like a punch to my chest every time I say it. She was my everything, my best friend, my biggest supporter, and the glue that held our family together. When she was gone, it felt like the entire world caved in on me. A couple of years later, my dad, Carter, remarried. Maria seemed nice at first, but that was just a mask she wore in front of my dad. Behind closed doors, she had a sharp tongue and an even sharper laugh, always at my expense. It didn't take long before her daughter, Hazel, followed suit. Hazel was a year younger than me, but she quickly became the center of my dad's world. I don't know when it happened exactly, but at some point, I became invisible. My dad was so enamored with his new family that he didn't notice how they treated me. Maria would undermine me every chance she got, while Hazel enjoyed taking little jabs, stealing my clothes, rolling her eyes whenever I spoke, and turning every situation into a competition she made sure to win. By the time I was in my 20s, I had learned to navigate the minefield that was my home. I'd focus on work, spend hours in my room, and avoid family dinners unless absolutely necessary. But the thing about pretending something doesn't hurt is that eventually the cracks start to show. And in my house, those cracks felt like chasms. I don't think I'll ever forget the loneliness of being in a room full of people who are supposed to love you, yet feeling entirely alone. That was my life, every single day, living under the same roof with Maria, Hazel, and the father who chose them over me. It all came to a head on my 26th birthday. Birthdays had never been a big deal in my house since my mom died. When I was little, she used to make them special: balloons in the kitchen, a homemade cake, and a smile that made me feel like the center of the universe. After she was gone, birthdays became a routine, almost an afterthought. Still, I always tried to make the best of it, even if it meant planning everything myself. This year I had kept it simple: a small cake, a few decorations, and just family. I wasn't expecting a parade or anything, but I thought, for once, it could be a peaceful day. Maybe even a day where I felt like I mattered. Everyone was sitting around the dining table. My stepmom Maria had her usual smirk plastered on her face, while Hazel scrolled through her phone, looking completely uninterested. My dad seemed preoccupied, barely glancing at me as I lit the candles on the cake. I took a deep breath, trying to convince myself that it didn't matter. "Happy birthday," Maria said lazily, more out of obligation than actual warmth. I smiled faintly and leaned over to blow out the candles when Hazel suddenly stood up. "Wait," she said, her voice sharper than usual. "I want to cut the cake." I froze, confused. "What? It's my birthday." "So," Hazel shot back, her tone dripping with entitlement, "I just want to do it. What's the big deal?" I looked at my dad, expecting him to step in to tell her no. Instead, he sighed like I was the one causing a scene. "Zoey, just let her cut it," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It's not a big deal. She's your sister. You should learn to share." "Share?" My chest tightened, and I felt the familiar sting of tears threatening to surface. I looked at him in disbelief. "It's my birthday, Dad. Why can't I just cut my own cake? Why do you always have to make everything about you?" Hazel snapped, standing inches away from me now. Before I could even process what was happening, she reached out and slapped me. Hard. The sound echoed in the room, and for a moment I couldn't move. I could feel the heat rising in my face, not just from the sting of her hand, but from the sheer humiliation. I looked at my dad again, hoping, praying that he would say something, do something. Instead, he shook his head. "Zoey, you should have just let her do it. Why do you always have to be so difficult? She's your sister. Learn some family respect." Family respect. Those words hit harder than Hazel's slap. Maria, sitting across the table, let out a soft laugh, shaking her head as if I were the punchline of some private joke. I felt my chest tighten, the air in the room becoming suffocating. My birthday, the one day I had hoped to feel seen, had turned into another reminder that I didn't belong here. I stood there for a moment, frozen, before quietly stepping away from the table and heading to my room. I could hear Maria's voice in the background, mocking me under her breath, and Hazel laughing like she'd just won some sort of twisted game. That night, I packed a bag. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I'd spent too many years trying to earn love and respect from people who were never going to give it. As I closed the door to my room for the last time, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the family I had lost and relief that, for the first time, I was choosing myself. The next morning, I left the house before anyone woke up. No note, no goodbye, just the quiet sound of the front door closing behind me. It was time to start over. It had been a year since I walked out of that house, and in that time, my life had changed more than I thought possible. I started from scratch, moving into a tiny apartment in Dallas and picking up extra shifts at the cafe where I worked. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For the first time, I wasn't walking on eggshells, waiting for someone to belittle me or tell me I wasn't enough. I was free. The freedom didn't come easy. In the beginning, I felt completely untethered, like a balloon that had been let go, floating aimlessly in the wind. I missed my mom more than ever, wondering what advice she'd have for me, wishing I could feel the warmth of her arms around me, telling me I did the right thing. But slowly, I found my footing. I made friends, real ones. People who laughed with me, not at me, who didn't treat kindness like it was a bargaining chip. I even started taking night classes to study graphic design, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the courage to pursue. For the first time in years, I was building a life that felt like mine. Then, one afternoon, everything came crashing back. It was a Saturday and I was in the middle of reorganizing my apartment when there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before peeking through the peephole. My heart sank. Standing there, looking haggard and worn, was my dad. I opened the door slowly, my stomach twisting into knots. "Dad?" "Zoey," he said, his voice cracking as if just saying my name was painful. "I need your help." I stepped aside, letting him in more out of shock than anything else. He looked different. His usually well-groomed hair was messy, his clothes wrinkled, and there was a desperation in his eyes that I'd never seen before. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my distance. He sat down on my couch, burying his face in his hands. "Maria and Hazel, they kicked me out. They said they're done with me. I don't have anywhere else to go, Zoey. Please, I just need a place to stay until I figure things out." I stared at him, unable to speak for a moment. All the memories I had tried to bury came flooding back, every time he dismissed me, every time he defended Maria and Hazel while I was left to fend for myself. And now he was here, asking me for help, when he had never been there for me. "I don't understand," I finally said, my voice trembling. "They kicked you out. Why?" He shook his head, looking ashamed. "Things haven't been great at home. Money's tight, and Maria, well, she's not who I thought she was. Hazel's grown up to be just like her. They don't need me anymore. They told me to leave." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound surprising even me. "So now that they've turned on you, you come to me? After everything?" "Zoey, I know I wasn't the best father," he said quickly, his words stumbling over each other. "I know I made mistakes, but I'm still your dad. Please, I need your help." The weight of his words pressed down on me like a stone. My mind raced, flashing back to all the times I had begged for his support, for his love, only to be met with indifference. Now, when he had nowhere else to turn, he wanted me to be the one to save him. I folded my arms, trying to steady myself. "You need my help now. Where was this concern when I needed you? When I was begging you to stand up for me, to see me? You chose them every single time. You told me to learn some family respect, remember? So why don't you go to your respectful family for help?" "Zoey, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I made mistakes, but I'm still your father. Don't turn your back on me." The audacity of his words hit me like a slap. Turn my back on him. That's exactly what he had done to me, over and over again. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking. "You know, Dad, for years I wanted your approval so badly. I wanted to feel like I mattered to you. But you made it clear that I didn't. You chose them every time, and now you're here, asking me to save you because they don't want you anymore. I'm sorry, but no. I've built a life for myself, a life without the constant pain of being overlooked and dismissed. I'm not going to let you back in just to tear it apart again." His face crumbled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered the years of hurt, the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering why I wasn't enough. "I can't help you," I said firmly, stepping toward the door. "I hope you figure things out, but you're going to have to do it without me." I opened the door, waiting for him to leave. He hesitated, his shoulders slumping as he stood up. He looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Zoey, I really am." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just watched as he walked out, closing the door behind him. As soon as he was gone, I felt a wave of emotion crash over me. Anger, sadness, relief. But most of all, I felt strong. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself, and it felt like reclaiming a piece of me that had been lost for so long. After my dad left, I sat on the couch in silence, staring at the door. My emotions were tangled, a mix of sadness, relief, and a strange, unfamiliar pride. I had spent most of my life chasing his approval, hoping for some acknowledgement, some proof that I mattered to him. But now I realized I didn't need it. I wasn't that scared, insecure girl anymore. The one who tiptoed around the house, afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. The one who swallowed her pain to keep the peace. That version of me had been left behind the day I walked out of their house. The life I had built wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. I had surrounded myself with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them or how much I could tolerate. My friends were my family now, the kind of people who would show up at midnight if I needed them, who celebrated my successes and held me up when things got hard. I thought about my mom and how proud she would have been. She always told me to stand up for myself, to never let anyone make me feel small. For years, I hadn't believed her words, but now they felt like a lifeline. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I grabbed a sketchpad and started drawing. Graphic design had become more than just a career goal for me. It was therapy, a way to pour my emotions onto paper. I wasn't just creating art. I was rebuilding myself, piece by piece. As I sketched, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by the expectations or judgments of people who didn't truly care about me. I was free. I thought about my dad, about how lost and broken he had looked. A part of me felt sorry for him, but I knew I had made the right choice. Letting him back into my life would have been like reopening an old wound that had finally started to heal. I had spent too long putting other people's needs above my own. That night, I went to bed feeling lighter than I had in years. I didn't need their approval or their love anymore. I had found something better, myself. The next morning, I woke up early, the sunlight streaming through my windows. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and dove into a new project for a client. It felt good to be working on something I was passionate about, something that was mine. As the day went on, I found myself smiling for no reason at all. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. And for the first time, I truly felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be.